We are recording, and just want to start with saying, indulge me because I do have notes that helps me stay on time and on task, but emotional intelligence is really literally nothing more than recognizing that we feel things, being conscientious about what we're feeling, owning what we're feeling, being aware of what other people are feeling, and learning to manage the whole process. But this is not about emotions are bad, emotions are wrong, you shouldn't feel that way. Look, you can't control how you feel. The only thing you can control is what happens next. And so we were all taught differently about emotions. Some of us, men in particular, are taught to hide it. Women are taught that these emotions are okay, those emotions are not. It's just a hot mess by the time we get to be adults. And so I passionately believe that emotional intelligence is something that we should teach at much younger ages, so that we begin to understand and appreciate that emotions are magical, wonderful things that actually connect us with the world around us and each other, and help us know what's going on, not just in our own selves, but sometimes at higher levels. Our higher self is trying to get our attention, or we're meant to do or be or say something that can help someone else. But the big thing is there's no right or wrong emotions in terms of what you feel. I want to start off with that right now. Whatever you feel is yours to feel. The most important thing is what happens next. So I do want to say hi just to the folks who are in the room, Donna and Mary Elizabeth and Lynn, and I know we had a few other people, and I don't want to spend too much time scrolling, but I'm just delighted that you are there. So before we get started, the big thing is there's going to be a lot of talk today about owning your emotions. And that means that whatever you feel is not only yours to feel, but it's yours. We get into habits of saying, you made me angry, you hurt my feelings, you don't care for me. We're projecting emotions onto other people. We're writing scripts about what they're thinking, what they believe, instead of saying, even to ourselves, when you do that, I feel this way. And so the scripts also that we write is when we get hurt, oh, you're a crybaby, you're being too sensitive. Or when we're angry, oh, well, don't get out of control. That, as if anger itself is this wrong thing that we shouldn't experience. The big thing today is I want you to more fully experience your emotions within your control, not willy-nilly. You feel this and you are out the back door screaming or crying or laughing or whatever, that you're feeling your emotions more fully, richly, deeply within your control. So make sure that part of this process is to make sure that you're realizing that self-control, self-discipline is not about stifling these emotions. It's about managing them. It's strength under control. And it's part of raising our vibration. I'm going to say this, and accept it or don't, I'm okay with it. I believe that a lot of what's happening in the world right now is because we have energies that are coming into the earth and the solar system that are raising the vibration of Gaia, of raising the vibration of Earth, and we're going along for the ride, whether we like it or not. And so to not lose our minds, we have to raise our vibrations as well. We have to become more. We have to be more, do more. And it seems like every time we get to a stable level, there's this new wave of frenetic energy that comes in, and that's exactly what's happening. So managing it now will give you the strength to go through the subsequent vibrational risings. All right, so one of the first things that I want to talk about as part of emotional intelligence, and it's absolutely, because I see it so much, is about building empathy. Now, a lot of differences here about empathy is not sympathy, and empathy is not being empathic. So empathic means I feel you, but empathy does not require me to feel you. It requires me to do three things, and this chart is exactly what I'm trying to communicate. It's about you understanding the other person's perspective. I bring this up because we are all social media whores right now, where we are online so much and we're engaging in useless arguments. We're trying to, and I do this. I am the, when you look this up in the dictionary, there's my photo, right? Trying to help people understand your point of view. We want to be heard. We want people to begin to understand masks, no masks, school, no school, this presidential candidate, that presidential candidate. But what's happening is we're getting caught up in the argument versus helping ourselves to understand other people's point of view. This isn't about agreeing with anybody, but it's about considering, what are they feeling? What are they thinking? Why do they think that way? Instead of labeling, judging, determining, if you think that, you must be this. Now, we could argue this all day, but part of emotional intelligence is observing without judgment. It is engaging without anger. It is having these conversations in ways that further understanding, not agreement, but understanding. If you're not here, this is like the 10th level, right? If you can't do this, don't be getting into these conversations. Part of emotional intelligence is knowing when to walk away. So building your empathy requires this. It's about being curious. When you get into conversations, instead of attacking and saying, well, how can you think that way, blah, 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 help me understand why you think that way. Now, let's walk away from social media for a minute and talk about you and your spouse having an argument. Hey, honey, help me understand why you did or didn't do that thing, versus you always, you never. When we make these judgments about how other people are thinking and how other people are behaving, you do that because we're not putting ourselves in their shoes. We're writing scripts that are usually conversations with our parents, our mom or dad, or we're a child again, and we feel a certain way because when you do this, I feel this. So you must have the same motive and intent as the first time that happened. The other thing is, walking in another person's shoes. I've been seeing a lot of this. We need to walk in someone else's shoes. Well, if I was in their shoes, I would do this. Yeah, no, that isn't empathy. Empathy is walking in someone else's shoes as if you were them, not as if you were you in their shoes. That's not empathy. That's you telling someone else how you would act if you were them, but you're not them and you don't know how they feel or what's going through their mind. So this is a practical application of empathy in that you are curious about what other people think, you are considering their perspective, not agreeing with it, and you're withholding judgment. Emotional intelligence is literally, in my opinion, a lot about observing without judgment. If we really want to become better people, and we really want to raise our emotional intelligence and our vibration and the state of the world in general, we begin engaging a lot more in observing, asking questions, and a lot less in judging, criticizing, and belittling. I don't see any questions on this, so there is a lag. Just be aware that what I see or what I say here, there's probably a 2-minute lag. So if I don't answer your question right away, it's just because there's that lag between what I see and the live feed over here. So the second part of practical emotional intelligence is what I call sugar-free positivity. Now, there is toxic positivity, and that is being disproportionately, falsely happy in the middle of bad things that are happening. I mean, look, we live in a batshit crazy world right now, and there's a lot of insane things happening. If you believe in the mask wearing and the social distancing and the staying at home, you're feeling alone and isolated and bored and questioning, life in general. If you're out and about, you're angry that the world has changed and that there's people living in fear and whatever. And so we kind of run down the rabbit holes of that fear and anger. Sugar-free positivity requires us to step back and say, this really sucks right now, but I'm going to figure out a way to make it through. I'm going to figure out how to survive this. This really sucks right now, no matter which side you're sitting on, And so how can I make this joyful? How can I find joy and happiness in this situation? It doesn't mean that you're not sad. It doesn't mean that you don't feel angry. But what it means is sugar-free positivity says, I'm not what's happening to me right now. Sugar-free positivity is part of emotional intelligence because we step away from how we feel and say, yes, I feel overwhelmed. I'm not sure what data is real. I am afraid if it's real, if it's not real. So how can I live my best, fullest, richest, most positive, helpful, loving, kind life in spite of it? Now here's the thing. Not having emotional intelligence is easy. Oh my God, so easy. You just are reactive. All you have to do is just react. You make me mad, I am gonna bite your head off. You irritate me, annoy me, hurt me, whatever. All I have to do is react. Emotional intelligence requires you to step back. And in the world that we're living in right now, we are so easily triggered. None of us are doing that. So sugar-free positivity is a piece of emotional intelligence. There's about 13 real-world examples we're going to go through today. And just remember, you can ask me for my notes. I'll send you a PDF copy of them so that you can see all the things that I'm working on. But the same bad thing can happen to two people, and depending on their level of emotional intelligence, one will weather it and one will be destroyed by it. And so part of what we've got to find out is, how do we weather this? Resilience is part of emotional intelligence. Okay, so here's one that's really fun and hard. It's part of emotional intelligence is being kind, it's being grateful, and it's being courteous. There is I think a batshit crazy phrase out there that says, I'll treat them with respect when they earn it. Now, here's the problem with that. If I don't like you, you will never earn my respect. So high emotional intelligence requires that I treat you with respect because that's who I am. Your worthiness doesn't have a thing to do with it. I'm going to be kind to you. I'm at least going to be courteous to you. And it isn't reliant on you, because the minute I let you be in control of how I act, I've surrendered my control. So I want to give some real life examples of how this plays out. One of it is being kind, grateful, and courteous is, let's say you get crappy service at a restaurant. I think we've all done it, and certainly now, while the restaurants are figuring out how to go from in-person dining to to-go dining, I can't imagine the logistics in that. We tend to be we're a very selfish, high maintenance, rent-to-own mentality culture. And I don't know if you see that right now, but what we have got to get back to is, I have to say, is this a pattern? If I order from you the first time and it sucks, well, it could just be a bad day. Emotional intelligence requires me to step back and say, okay, how do I know this isn't a bad day? If I've had a bad day, then you suck and your restaurant sucks and I'm going to give you a horrible review. But let's think about this for a second. Do you know that is the case? Think about saying please and thank you. Believe it or not, part of being emotionally intelligent is being courteous, is that it isn't just all about you and you're having a crappy day. You're becoming aware that other people are struggling too. And the way that we're going to survive all this as a culture is that we be kind and courteous and gracious and grateful to one another. It is seriously something as little as saying please and thank you. I want you to think about gossiping. It is psychological violence, and it comes from low emotional intelligence, where I need to feel better and I need to say something hateful about you so that I feel better. That is neither kind, grateful, nor courteous. It's like your mama said, if you don't have something nice to say, stop talking, okay? Sometimes silence better serves us and is actually a demonstration of our emotional intelligence. How good are you at saying, I'm sorry, or I was wrong? I have worked with clients and individuals who literally I'm not going to say they choke on the word, but they struggle with it, as if somehow that's talking about your character or who you are as a person. I would encourage you to consider, how often do you say please, thank you, and I'm sorry? Because that will give you a good gauge on where you're at in terms of some basic emotional intelligence. The other thing is being helpful when it makes sense. Low emotional intelligence means you're an enabler, you're helping everybody to your own detriment. All right, that's not good. Emotional intelligence is about knowing when to be helpful and when you're enabling, and when you don't have the reserves or resources to be helpful. You overcommit, underdeliver. So kindness, gratitude, and courtesy is directly tied to our emotional intelligence. Here's something that was really hard for me to learn. And I want to give you a real life example for me. Is as I was learning to build my emotional intelligence, everything was about me. If you, anything, I mean, honestly, it was so bizarre how if you said or did something, if a meeting went a certain way, if someone suggested a change to a project, it was all personal. You didn't like me, you didn't like my ideas, you thought this, you thought that. It was nuts. And I began to realize that was because I was living so insecurely that I took everything personally. I was writing scripts based on how I had been treated in the past, or how I had been afraid of being treated. So I have to tell you, part of emotional intelligence, and an amazing amount of release will come when you begin to don't give a damn about what you think other people are thinking, because I guarantee you people aren't thinking about you as much as you think they are, and the motives and intentions that you're assigning to people are likely incorrect, unless you're psychic, in which case I applaud you for that, but most of us are not, right? Or we're misreading things based on our own insecurities. So start thinking about, how are you living where everything's personal? That they did that because they don't like me. Did you see the look she gave me? A lot of us have resting bitch face, and we don't know the looks that we give people. And so you're assigning. I'm guilty of having done this. We're assigning all these motives and intents to people's behaviors and looks. And let me tell you what I think why. And this is probably women more than men. I know we have some guys on the call right now. So let me say hey to Kay and Carolyn and Daphne and Scott and Todd and Elle and Shannon. Thank you for joining us today. So here's the thing, and like I said, I think this is women more than men. We're so insecure and we take everything so personally because we're so judgy. So when somebody walks into the room, you walk into a room by yourself, you're like, oh my gosh, they're looking at me. They're looking at my hair. They're thinking this, they're thinking that. Well, you're assigning motive and intent because that's what you do when someone walks into a room. And so you're making this value judgment based on how you behave. Stop doing it, judging people, criticizing people, doing these mental evaluations when someone walks in the room. And I can guarantee that will help raise your emotional intelligence and help you let go of worrying about what other people think about you. Let your give a damn get broken about that. So, assertive, aggressive, and passive. This is kind of funny, and it's a thin line, but in terms of being assertive versus aggressive, I want you to stop for a moment. I want you to think about some of these scenarios. How many times have you stayed in a miserable relationship, a bad job, an uncomfortable social situation, because you can't stand up for yourself? You can't face the moment when you have to say, either aloud or to yourself, I'm not going to let you treat me like that anymore. Don't talk to me like that. I don't appreciate this when you do this. Or we simply can't make ourselves say, no, I don't want to go with you. We can't be assertive in our own defense. We can stand up for other people. we may be really great at some of this stuff, but we're not so good at standing up for ourselves. Let's say you got passed over for a job, or you didn't get the raise that you wanted, or you were shunned in a social group. A lot of times when we have low emotional intelligence, instead of being assertive, which doesn't mean we confront everybody, assertive just means you're taking care of yourself in a proactive way. But a lot of times with low emotional intelligence, you manage that behavior with some very passive aggressive stuff, which is aggressive is one thing. It's where I get in your face and I'm like, oh no, you didn't, versus, you know, I don't really care for it when you talk to me like that. And then passive aggressive, of course, is when I'm going to sabotage you, gossip about you behind your back, a lot of these other things. So I want you to look at this chart. Your needs being number one more than anything else, with no consideration for anyone else, can tend to make you behave in very aggressive ways. And then when you put everybody else first, when you're a pleaser, when you don't think about yourself at all to your own detriment, then you're too passive. But assertive is when you're balancing what you need with what other people need. And I can tell you that I believe we were created by the one infinite creator for love and service, but it's also love for ourselves and service to ourselves. It's a balance. It's a 50-50 balance of taking care of and loving myself and taking care of and loving everything else. And so this assertiveness doesn't have to be confrontational. I think there's a lot of people who think that being assertive means I've got to argue with you. Sometimes being assertive is just walking away. And so that's a healthy way to be assertive, where you're just not confrontational. You're honest with tact. Well, I didn't come to your party because the last 2 times that I've been there, there was a sense that I didn't belong. I was ignored actively by some people, and I didn't feel comfortable being there. I mean, there's ways that we can communicate without being confrontational, without blaming. It's simply stating facts in a loving way. So this one is kind of fun, and I want to talk about this because here's what I see happening is just because you feel depressed doesn't mean you have depression. Just because you've been through trauma and you feel traumatized doesn't necessarily take you over to PTSD. These things are real and they happen, and some people struggle with them. As I said at the beginning, if you're under the care of a physician, you just a mental health professional or a doctor of any kind, you do what they say. But I think a lot of times we self-diagnose to the extreme because we become our emotions. We become the things that have happened to us. I encourage you to watch the launch video where I go into great detail about some of the horrific things that have happened to me, so that you can understand that I don't know how you feel, but I do know how it feels to have been through some horrible things. And I struggled until I was 40. This was 20 years ago. I'm almost 60, and I've spent the last 20 years working to heal these hurts, because I had become the emotion of grief. I had become the emotion of trauma. I had become the emotion of sadness and rejection. Feeling your emotions, think of it as a wave. Feeling your emotions means that you let it wash over you. There's a lady I highly recommend. Her name's Ava Angvert Heron, and she runs a company called Beam Life. And she's a somatic coach. And she says it all the time, is to feel your emotions and just watch them. They aren't going to eat you. Your emotions are not going to eat you up. Feel them, observe them from a distance, witness it, allow it to happen, and then move forward. You may not be ready to release it, but I can tell you that you can observe it and feel it without becoming it. And a lot of times, and I think this is why a lot of people are struggling right now, because we have distracted ourselves so fully and completely from our emotions that now that we're all in lockdown, or many of us are, we have nothing to distract us from what's going on in our head. And so now that you don't have these distractions, you're feeling things and you don't even know what it is. Observe those emotions. Ask yourself, wonder where that came from, and keep asking that. Keep asking that. Don't become the emotion. A lot of times you may feel sad and you just start like, I'm sad, without saying, that's interesting. Where did that come from? And working through that emotion. Again, remember, I'm still going to do the Q&A, but if you have any questions, don't hesitate to pop them up. So one of the best examples of high emotional intelligence is your ability to say no to yourself. Now, I'm going to give some practical examples of this. Let's say you keep saying you want to go to the gym, but you don't go. You keep saying you want to work out, but you don't go. You're not able to say no to the things that are distracting you from doing what you really want to do. Or you're saying that you ought to do something with no intention of doing it. Either way, your emotional intelligence is low because you are either not making yourself do something that you know you should or that you want to, or you are lying to yourself by just saying you're going to do something knowing that you're not. Another example is engaging in semi-addictive behavior. Now, true addictions are another much more deeper thing, and sometimes they have physiological causes, but semi-addictive behavior is when you're eating a little too much, or you've put on what they call the COVID-19, right? Because you haven't said no to yourself because you're trying to distract yourself. Another thing is where you don't say no to yourself. You want to do this one thing that's very important to you, but you let yourself get distracted by this other thing, or you start projects and don't finish it. You're not making yourself do the things that you know you should do. Because part of emotional intelligence is the ability to motivate ourselves. Stop looking for motivation outside of yourself, because discipline is freedom. Think about this. With emotional intelligence, you learn that if you succumb to freedom, where you just do what you feel like doing, you are slave to your whims. You are slave to your momentary passions. I don't feel like doing that, so I'm not. Well, why don't you feel like doing it? Dig into that, and at the same time say, well, I hate that you don't feel like. What would you say to a child? You don't have to want to, you just need to do it. And then you dig into the why. I mean, I will tell you, I lost 130 some pounds, and that's been a really big process of figuring out why I behave a certain way. I didn't want to go to the gym. I didn't want to follow these protocols to lose the weight. But emotional intelligence, the saying no to myself, is learning to manage my thinking and understanding that sometimes I don't feel like doing it. But because I can say no to myself and like, no, you need to wait, or you need to do. The other thing, next, so triggers. Boy, that's a fun word that people just seem to love to throw around. Well, they triggered me. Okay, the point of knowing triggers isn't so that you can blame someone for them. You triggered me. You shouldn't have said that. No, that's not the point of learning about triggers. The point of learning about triggers is so that you know what triggers you, so that when it happens, you can manage it, not that you can blame somebody. When you are triggered, this list right here is usually why. You feel one of these things. And so when someone says or does something, let me give you an example. I used to get triggered by tardiness to the point that I was a rude bitch. And if you were 5 or 10 minutes late to a meeting, I would verbally say to you, well, I can see that you clearly, didn't think this was important enough. And so we're going to have to reschedule. If you weren't there in 10 minutes, I would leave. Now, sometimes there were legitimate reasons that people were late. My anger had nothing to do with their behavior. It had to do with me feeling forgotten, not important. You said you were going to do something and you didn't. I mean, all these things that would trigger my feelings of worth, of lack of worth. And as I began to realize that, I was more proactive. Back to the sugar-free positivity. I don't like how people may behave. And so what can I do to help them fall in line with, work with me? How can I make the best of this situation? So I would remind people, you know, hey, we have a meeting tomorrow. Is that still good for you? If they were late, I always had something to do so that I had a useful thing to do. If they never showed up, I would think, okay, what does the universe have in mind for me to do? Why am I here right now? Why did the universe let me be here and they're not here? And so I began to find ways to manage that, and all of that was within my control. I stopped letting other people control how I got triggered. I would also be triggered by if you said you were going to do something and you didn't. Ask my husband about that one. I still get kind of nuts when someone says they're going to do something and they don't. And I have to really work on that. And so think about what triggers you, not for the purpose of blaming someone, but for the purpose of knowing what triggers you so that you're better able to manage it when it happens. Pick one of these. I feel unloved. Well, okay, where did that come from? What happened in your childhood or recent years that made you feel unloved when that happens? And when you feel that way, what happens next? So when I feel unloved, when I used to feel unloved, insignificant, unimportant, I would go eat something. Fine, I'll show you. I'm going to go eat something. Comforting, self-comforting. In a sad, sick kind of way, after I was in difficult situations as a child, that was the ice cream was the reward. I don't even like ice cream that much, and I would eat pints of it as a way of comforting myself when I felt a certain way. So start thinking of triggers as not a red flag like for you to lose your shit, but think of these triggers as an attention-getting caution flag where you begin to start thinking about, oh, what do I need to know, do, be? How do I handle this? What happens next? Okay, calmness. You know, I want you to think about how many times a day you talk about how upsetting the world is, and I want you to balance that with how many times a day you get into arguments on social media. One of these things is not like the other. If you want calm and peace in the world, then be an agent of calm and peace. I'm not saying not to have difficult conversations. I'm saying if you are going to, if you want calmness, if you want peace, make sure you're not stirring the pot. Make sure that you're not an agent of discord. And so what about itching for arguments? I remember as I was building my emotional intelligence, I would save calling about customer service issues for a day when I felt grumpy so that I could be more assertive. Yeah, boy, I'm going to give them a piece of my mind. What I was doing was dumping my angst on them. I was waiting until I felt grumpy enough to go back and basically I was attacking someone because of how I felt versus dealing with the issue. So let's talk about this in the real world. Again, I want to emphasize to you, I don't know how you feel, but I have had some crazy things happen to me. And as I've been building my emotional intelligence, being calm doesn't mean, again, being calm doesn't mean that you don't feel any of the things that are your right to feel in a difficult situation. What it means is, oh, wow, you know, my money is crazy tight. I'm not sure how I'm going to pay some bills. I feel anxious about that. I'm not asking my anxiety to go away. I'm not saying I shouldn't feel anxious, but I'm going to manage that and say, okay, what's the priority here? Okay, if I'm short on money, how do I calm myself? How do I make more money? How do I make a plan? Not, My temptation in this circumstance is to be like, oh, we're going to die. We're going to lose the house. You know, my credit's going to go to hell. You know, just fill in the blank with panic. But calmness as a superpower simply means it means I say to myself, I have a 100% survival rate from difficult circumstances. I know I'll make it through this. And I have to stay focused on what matters. I have a hair on my nose. It's itching me. Sorry. So calm as a superpower means not that you don't feel what you're feeling, but it means that you are finding the positive, finding solutions, accepting some inevitable things, and recognizing that what's out of your control is absolutely out of your control, and I have to focus on what I can control. All right, speaking of control, this was probably the hardest lesson of emotional intelligence that I had to learn, and it was about releasing control. When you join a team or a group and you have to be the top dog and you have to be in charge, that is your low emotional intelligence kicking in. When you put out an idea at a meeting, and if someone wants to change it or criticizes it or asks a question about it, you're all defensive. That's low emotional intelligence. When you are wanting to control everything, particularly in social situations, you want to control people and timelines and outcomes and behaviors, because you have this vision of loveliness, it's this quest for perfection. This is low emotional intelligence. Your desire for closure is low emotional intelligence. When you struggle to forgive and let go, I don't mean forgive and forget, but I mean forgive and release that anger, that need for justice. We tend to think the more we control things, the better it is. But the reality is that emotional intelligence requires us to consider that the only thing we can control is ourselves. The only thing you can control is what goes on basically within your skin sac and within just a few feet around you with your aura and your energy as you engage with other people. So the question for emotional intelligence as it relates to control is, how good are you at letting go? How good are you at not needing to be the top dog, the center of attention, the loudest voice in the room? Our need to be heard and for people to do what we say and see our point of view, it really comes from low emotional intelligence. Just do what I say. Just how can you not see my point of view? It is our need to control and our need to have things our way. Remember, you can always ask questions. We're going to go to Q&A here in just a minute, but this is way more than I can cover in just a few moments. But how coachable are you? Part of emotional intelligence means you can accept legitimate criticism, not some of the ugly stuff that we see on social media right now, but someone criticizes your work and offers suggestions for improvement. I worked at a technology incubator in Fort Worth, and it was kind of a joke and not, but the lady that I worked for would say, don't get defensive. Now, I don't know about you, but what do you say to that? It's like, have you stopped beating your wife? I mean, there's no good answer to that, but I did figure something out. When someone says, don't get defensive, recognize that you feel defensive. And you might want to say, I'm not trying to be defensive. I have concerns about whatever. So whatever you're worried about. I learned to say, I'm not trying to act defensively. I have concerns about if we change this, will we lose the integrity of the project? Or I have concerns about why you want to change that. So part of accepting criticism, and sometimes part of accepting criticism, is our ability to say, I hadn't thought about it that way. And then say, I'll process it. We don't have to make a decision right then if someone makes a suggestion. I used to work for a guy named Steve Worm at the Boys and Girls Clubs, and he used to say to me, Sarah, you don't have to convince anybody. You're out there and you're too much, and you're almost like trying to make people think that you're so great. you don't have to convince them. Just be yourself. Just do what you do. And I didn't listen to him at the time, but I learned that that was accurate. So a lot of times the criticism that we resist the most is likely the truest for us. And so be aware, particularly if you keep hearing the same thing over and over. I heard a lot of criticism years ago, over and over and over. And it was, bossy. And I was being bossy, not helpful. I'm a strong person anyway. And so I had to find new ways to frame my suggestions so that it didn't sound so bossy. And so as I began to be able to take criticism, and again, this is helpful criticism, but it is, let me think about that. Let me see how that plays out. The next to the last thing is finding the courage to be authentic. This is one of the highest ways you can love yourself. And here's how this plays out in the real world is you say yes when you want to say no. You say you're going to do something and you don't do it, and you knew you were never going to do it. Or you're worried about what other people think so much that you aren't acting in ways that are authentic to who you are. That, you say you were told as a child that older women shouldn't wear long hair. I mean, I'm almost 60. I decided to grow my hair out to my butt. I can, right? And I don't care what you think. Or think about the times that you wanted to do something magical, wonderful. I went to Africa and there was an opportunity to go scuba diving. I don't scuba, but I do snorkel. And I was so nervous about it because I just am. And I was either going to fake that I wasn't nervous or I wasn't going to do it saying I wasn't interested. And what I actually ended up doing was saying, I'm really anxious about this, but I really want to do it. And oh my word, people were so helpful. It was a magical, wonderful experience. By being authentic, I actually gave people the opportunity to help me through it. But a lot of times we tend to think that we have to behave in ways that are not authentic to who we are. Right now, I've been going through a spiritual reformation of, recarving out what I believe spiritually, metaphysically, and there was a little anxiety worrying about what would people think. And I realized that what I was more worried about was a disproportionate fear of offending people with this. And I realized that it came from, as a child, you must follow these rules, and if you don't, people won't like you. And so I want you to think about, what are times and moments when you wanted to do or be something and you didn't because you were worried about what other people would think? Emotional intelligence gives you the power to say, I love myself enough and I am going to let go of my fear of what other people think to be myself. And then you draw your tribe to you. If you're unhappy with the group of people you have around you, it could be because you're not being your authentic self. And then the last thing I want to talk about as part of emotional intelligence, and get your questions ready because I'm really quick to shut this down if we don't have a lot of questions because I don't want to waste your time. But the last thing I want to talk about is observing without judgment. I want you to think about how many times in a day you see something on Facebook, or you are in public, you see someone's dress, or you see someone's vehicle, or you see someone's behavior, and you're making all these value judgments about who they are, what they think, all of these. You write this script about who this person is. And what if you were just able to observe people without judgment, without an intention for them to be or do something, without any expectation, and you begin to observe people, yourself, your family, without judgment? I am nowhere near where I want to be, but 2 years ago, I started this practice of mindfulness, which includes observing without judgment. And wow, it is an amazing, freeing thing. And so this is the last thing. So if there are any questions, any problem solving that you want done, any anything, now is the time. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to get that there. Take this off of screen sharing. And if you guys have anything that I can help you with, now is the time to ask those questions, and we will have that conversation. So I'm going to go over to the Facebook page over here. Give me a minute. And all right, I don't see any questions. I don't see that I missed any. I'm glad that I was able to answer whatever questions y'all have. I'm gonna wait another minute or two. Here's something y'all can do for me though, is please share these videos. I really want to help other people. I do this for a living, I get paid to do this, and so I can do these for free to help people. And so if you know somebody who may be struggling with their emotional intelligence, please feel free to share this with them. So thank you, Donna. I appreciate that. So, all right. Well, until we get together again, my friends, you have been zinced.